Hey everyone, welcome back to our July traffic talk. I'm Jeanne Ingersoll, our Director of Business Development for Shopper Track. I'm joined yet again by Grant Gustafson. He is our Head of Retail Consulting for Shopper Track globally. And this month we're diving into back to school. It's a season that's already well underway. It touches nearly every single retailer, and it gives us really the clearest read ahead of the holidays. So Grant, let's start with talking about the timing because back to school doesn't hit the country all at once. What can you share with us there?
Yeah, I mean, such a critical time of year for retailers. One thing that really makes the back to school season really kind of unique is that it doesn't happen all at once. It really kind of moves across the country like a wave, really based off where the kids go back to school in your specific area or market. Specifically when we look at like the South and the West, school districts in those areas can go back to school as early as late July and early August. From there, we protect the South and the West is really going to see peak traffic in early August, really that first week between August 2nd and August 8th. The Midwest is kind of that happy medium where, schools go back more towards the middle to the end of August. Our data again points that we should see peak traffic in the Midwest sometime between August 9th and August 15th. And then the Northeast, they really go back to later than anyone else. In some cases, some of the school districts in the Northeast don't even go back to school till after Labor Day. So in this case, our data points to peak traffic happening between, August 16th and August 29th. One thing that's a little unique about the calendar this year is that Labor Day does fall a little bit later this year, kind of in the fiscal calendar, kind of a week later. We do anticipate that our peak traffic will still happen within July, but in regions like the North or Northeast, you may see a little bit of a flattening of a curve, but we still expect peak shopping to happen prior to Labor Day weekend. For retailers, what's really important is to know is that, back to school is really a 6 to 8 week, shopping event. It's really important to require flexing things like staffing, inventory, promotions, market by market, really as this event kind of stretches across the entire country. One thing we should note is that our consumers have really been telling us they've been shopping earlier and earlier every year. We continue to see that in our data. However, we don't think that will impact overall peak traffic. So still expect August to be the busiest month overall.
A lot of really, really great information there. The biggest takeaway is that it occurs within a wave. Which categories end up feeling this the most?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of categories, really all of retail, everywhere from big box to electronics to home furnishings. Categories will all see impact, but some of the most critical or most overly impactful categories, are specifically going to be things like apparel and accessories. When we think of children's or family apparel brands, last year in our data, we saw that family apparel had its best performing months in July and August, from a year over year perspective, up 1% and 0.5% respectively. Overall, when the year was down a little around 2%. The other big category that's really important to talk about is footwear. What's really crazy about footwear is that footwear, the back to school season can really rival the holiday season. We see in our data that traffic can actually be the same or if not greater for footwear during the back to school season than it is during the holiday period. So for categories like apparel and accessories and footwear, this isn't a shoulder season. This is peak season.
You're taking me back now to when I was a little kid. I remember my parents taking me shoe shopping. That was like a quintessential back to school thing. And I'm already shopping for my kids and they don't go to school and they don't start school until late August. So, and here's what really makes this important beyond, the immediate sales is that back to school is really, like you said, a barometer for how retail is going to perform and how the consumer is feeling heading into the holiday season. So it's the last big spending moment before Q4, and it's the second busiest season of the year for retailers outside of holiday. How shoppers show up now, in whether they're trading down, hunting for deals, if they're spending super confidently, it tells us a lot about November and December. And that's exactly why, Grant, you and I both know that Orbit AI is helping our retail clients really get ahead of the signal. So beyond traffic counts, we're helping retailers surface who's walking in through demographics, how they're engaging through dwell time, and then which trips are converting by a clear view via employee exclusion. So that lets retailers read back to school and the signal really early and pressure test our holiday season before we even get to Black Friday. So when you connect it all, the regional wave, the category impact, the read into the holiday, back to school really is one of the most important early warning systems in retail. So shop, and in case you're not familiar, for those of you that are listening in, ShopperTrack partners with over 2,100 retailers globally. If you'd like to see how back to school traffic is trending versus the market, or if you want to learn more about Orbit AI and how we are supporting our clients with the use cases we just discussed, connect with Grant and I on LinkedIn. We would love to continue the conversation. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in August.
Until next month, Jeannie.
Thanks, Grant.